Hi, good afternoon, everybody. A very wintry welcome to Johannesburg, South Africa. I come to you live from LA, also known as Lower Alberton. We are on In Such a Time as This. And as you know, we do like we do. We are going to be having some conversational story sharing with a few beautiful folk today. And if I can just show you the lineup for the day, there you have it. um, Brian Helsby at 12:30 p.m. So for the next hour, it's our honor to have Brian Helsby in studio, and then at 4 p.m. we have Colin Shava from Nairobi, Kenya, and then at 8 p.m. we have Vanita Pillay. So that's the lineup for the day, and it's our honor to be in conversation and learning and engagement with leaders in their own right, servants in their own right, people that have been considering working um, in different communities and different spaces throughout the world. So friends, in a moment or two, I should be having Brian Helsby arriving in the studio as we collect our thoughts and remember the last 2.5 or 3 months. This is what we're doing. So if you're coming in, please join us with some of your chat lines. Brian Helsby is about to be brought into the studio, and as we build this thread together with you all, let's continue this conversational story sharing as we critically reflect, uh, think upon some disruptive learning, and then what are our actions to call in service. In this month of July, we are focusing on beloved community. Like I said a minute or two ago, in the next hour, I have Brian Helsby with me in studio. So let's just take a moment to capture and think upon where we've come with this online broadcast over the last 3 months. In such a time as this, conversational story sharing by thought leaders, practitioners, and activists from South Africa and around the world. Join us as we engage in critical reflections, disruptive learning, and a call to action and service so we can make a difference and lasting change in our everyday world.
Thank you to the people on the service line, people who care, people who share, courageous, caring people, beautiful people, courageous, serving people, beautiful people. We say thank you. All just courageous, caring people, beautiful people. Courageous, serving people, beautiful people. Thank you to the people.
It's been an awesome opportunity for us to be doing this work around South Africa and around the world, and just beautiful memories over the last 2.5, 3 months, while in lockdown, while in COVID-19 and Corona situations, in the midst of so much going on in our country and around the world, we've been able to be in a moment like this, on in such a time as this, having the opportunity to be in conversational story sharing with people from all over this country. Like I just said, on the live streaming, we have Brian Helsby in studio, followed by Colin Shava, and then Vanita Pillay. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, 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 I believe he's in studio. Oh, yes, yes, he has arrived. I bring to you. Uh-huh. Just, you said I just should say Brian. I bring to you Brian. How are you,
I
Brian?
said, good to be with you and all the people listening in and watching.
Well, we're hoping a lot of folk join the stream, but thank you for taking the time to be with us today. How are the family doing?
Now we're all fine, and my wife Megan, we kind of hold up by ourselves, and all our own kids and grandkids are quite far away, but they're all doing well, all doing very very well.
I know that you have a coffee shop time with your grandkids and you use technology quite well. Before COVID-19, you were doing
Mm.
Skype calls with your
Yes,
grandkids in the UK. And I
yes.
think you mentioned some time ago that you spend quality time with them. I think it's on every Sunday.
Yeah, we Skype them on Sundays. That's been like for years and years we've been doing that. But with the lockdown, we connecting a lot more often, and sometimes we will play some board games over the internet as well and over Skype, and that's a lot of fun. So yeah, it's all good. And my grandson turned 16 today. So and Ryan and I, we have an incredible relationship, and we have our coffee one coffee chats as well. So which I really enjoy.
There's your coffee.
And so yes, all good.
Beautiful, thank you. And I hear Megan in the space there bringing you some coffee.
She has just brought me some coffee.
Cappuccino.
Brought me a cappuccino. Yes, doesn't get
Nice
much
stuff.
better than that. Doesn't get much better.
So, friends, we are in studio with Brian Helsby. Those of you that are around, you're welcome to be a part of the chat and online. I myself have known Brian for many years. I think this year is around about 30 years of knowing Brian. So I won't tell you how young he is and how old I am. But one of the special places I enjoyed being with you, Brian, way back when, was in a campsite called Kayara. Do you still remember that campsite?
I do. I do. I remember kicking you on the soccer field.
So yes, go and enjoyed attending camps in Kayara with Brian at the Youth for Christ National Training Center. Friends, over this next hour, we have the time to be in conversation with Brian. By way of me doing justice, there's a lot I can say about Brian as a friend and as a colleague, but just to let you know a little bit about where he's at, and as we do in good South African style, to honor the leaders that take the time to be with us in conversation. So here we go, Brian, from your bio. Brian Helsby works full-time for Heartlines as a senior program manager with a focus on church mobilization for What's Your Story. He has been on Heartlines staff for the past 16 years. Heartlines uses the media to challenge the nation to live out positive values. Brian has authored 8 of Heartlines values resource books and has overseen the development of a number of other Heartlines values resources. Brian enjoys training and seeing people develop to their full potential. Brian was on the staff of Youth for Christ South Africa for 31 years and served as their national director for 7 years. He also served on the international board of Youth for Christ. He has chaired the national board of YFCSA for 10 years, has chaired the Scripture Union Committee for Ikemaleng Youth Center in Alexandra and the Scripture Union Gauteng South Executive Committee. Brian is married and very happily and lucky to be the partner of the most awesome, outstanding, outrageous, most creative, most fun Megan.
I never wrote that. I never wrote that. You're adding it. You're adding it.
I added it in. Who's a children's work specialist and pre-primary school teacher, trainer with Love Trust. They have 2 married sons and 4 grandchildren. Friends, I bring you Brian Helsby. How's that for a reading
Thanks.
of the bio?
Sure, it's very impressive, but you added quite a bit.
I added quite a bit. Brian, please tell us a little bit about your work. Obviously, you've written about it and we read it in your bio, but we know that for many years you've been associated with Heartlines, and I've been grateful to journey with you for the last 10 years in that space. But I know that there's been a sincere heartbeat and passion for going around the country and doing work around values-based leadership. Tell us a little bit about your work and what you guys are currently busy with at Heartlines.
Yes, and I've loved the years that I've been with Heartlines, and I've enjoyed all that it involves, and it's very diverse from writing materials to training. And I must admit, the thing that rings my bells the most is actually being in front of people, young people, older people, training them, training church leaders, pastoring, taking some church leaders and pastors on kind of reconciliation journeys as well. So I'm really I've really enjoyed my time with Heartlines, and it rings my bells because the passions that I have for social justice, for the church. I love the church. I love being able to add value wherever I can. I love being able to journey with church leaders. And also at Hotlines, it gives me an opportunity to mentor people and some of the staff and some of the people outside of the office, being involved in my own church. And so at this stage of my life, and you can see from all the wrinkles that I'm not that young anymore, uh, but just to be still doing what I'm passionate about, what I enjoy, uh, is awesome. And then prior to that, all the years of Youth for Christ, being involved with running a youth group in one way or another for 36 years of my life. Besides being national director of Youth for Christ, getting in the trenches, getting down with young people and engaging with them has been a really incredible privilege part of my journey in life.
Brian, and it's been an awesome journey at that of your life of service through organizations like Youth for Christ and Heartlines. I know that in much of your work, you've been an ambassador for championing values and values-based leadership. May I ask you, what are one of the key values? If not one, maybe there are two, but at least one of the values that you've tried to uphold in your service as a leader, as a servant of people, in the different roles you've played over these years.
I think a compassion and empathy, because there's so much overlap between the two. I think that if we had a stronger dose of compassion in the way that we treated people, in the way we interacted with people, and with that comes empathy, to get into their shoes, to feel their pain, to feel their journey, what they're going through, and and so I think that those I mean, there are many others. I think service and serving people. And so often, as Christians, we are not called to be served, as Jesus said, but we are called to serve. And we are called to go every day into our world, into our broken world, and look for opportunities to serve. And during the lockdown, it can be more restrictive, but there are also still incredible ways that we can serve people who are lonely, people who are needing words of encouragement. And I've tried to do that in my life. I can't say that I've always succeeded, but I've tried hard.
So, friends, there you have it. We're in studio with Brian Helsby, and thank you for that, Brian. Some values-based leadership. If you haven't heard it before, I captured it for you right now. So, if you're going to be writing some academic articles or any books on this person that has been journeying for around about, a good 40 years, 4 decades in his career, capture this: compassion and empathy. If we have a stronger dose of compassion and empathy, Brian Helsby. How's that, Brian? In the
Yeah,
making. Raptured
yeah,
and a quotable quote. So,
yeah.
friends, thank you. This is Brian Helsby. It's what we do. We're having our coffees together, virtual coffee shop style.
I've got mine as well.
There he goes. Cheers, Brian. Cheers, and thank you for being with us right here. Uh, there are some viewers online. You're welcome to come in with the way that it works best is bring a quotable quote, add a statement, or take something on. If you're online right now, the way that you can get these conversations, which become in some way a learning session for people to reflect and consider, you can also host the show by sharing it, and people that are then in your Facebook community will have access to that as well. Friends, at this time, we want to take a step back for a moment to let you know, and you've already, Brian has already referenced it. It's referenced it in his bio, in some of his work that is done. And before I go, because I've never had a key person like Brian on this What's Your Story formula that has gone throughout the country. So before I go to the video, and because he's my co-host and co-conversational partner, Brian, I know that you've enjoyed yourself most rigorously and robustly. I've seen you in action on the trail for the last 7 years of this. What was originally, building phases of what became known as What Your Story. What a beautiful campaign. before I play the video that I'm about to show everyone, please tell us something about this as you intro the video for us, and then I'll cut away to the video.
Yes. Well, life is all about relationships. And very often we live in a world where relationships are broken or are not very strong. And there's not a more powerful tool that we have of getting to know people, of building relationships, of building relational bridges than simply listening to people's stories and getting the opportunity of sharing our own. And if we kind of woke up every morning with the thought, I wonder whose story I'm going to hear about today, and we go out looking for people's stories, asking the right questions, engaging. And sometimes we don't have a chance to sit at a coffee shop for half an hour to get to know a little bit of somebody's story, but we can get to know people's stories one question at a time. And that person behind the counter, that person that we meet every day or every few days, and just asking the right question, and slowly, little bit by little bit, their story unfolds and the relationship grows between us. And so What's Your Story is about mobilizing growing numbers of people in South Africa to have the skills to know how to ask people about their stories, to know how to listen to people's stories in a way that engages and shows that you're engaged. And then, how do I tell my story? What do I tell? What do I put in? What do I leave out? How personal do I get? And to give people those skills. And we want people in churches, in small groups, in families, in places of work, in schools, in tertiary institutions, all to have the skills. And it's not rocket science. It's not complicated. In fact, if you've got the heart for it, you'll automatically know how to do it. But sometimes people need a little bit of coaching, a little bit of help, and they need the opportunities to be created in their church groups, their Bible study groups, in their families. So yes, as you said, I'm really excited about it, and the research that we have done on the work over the last number of years has shown that once a person has shared their story and has listened to other people's stories, that 80% of them, 80% make story sharing a way of life. They'll go to their next door neighbors or the person at work or another person in their Bible study group or church or in their family, and they'll ask those people about their stories. And so it goes viral. Story sharing becomes viral as more and more people share their stories with people who share their stories, and so it goes on. And it's awesome.
So there you have it. I mean, if you're in a corporate space, if you're in a community space, if you're in a non-profit organization, if you're in a social club, for those of us now, we can't really be so social, but physically distancing has allowed online activities. Let me give you a snapshot of this campaign. Remember, as Brian has just positioned it, can you imagine 18,000 people thereabout across South Africa who have had not just, if I may say, a passing moment, but a quality moment of thinking through their stories in such a time as this. Let's check out the power of stories and story sharing as Brian Helsby has lined it up.
The world moves fast around us. Sometimes it feels like a blur. We pass each other and make judgments of each other constantly. You're doing it right now, seeing this woman across the street. We cross and recross, but rarely connect. We struggle to understand each other, so we don't trust each other. I know your name, but I don't know who you are. You know my name, but do you know my story? What would help us see beyond our perceptions? Story. Our stories are what make us human. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. Sharing a story isn't hard. is a simple human act, connecting us deeper to people we already know. Reach out, ask, invite, then listen, truly listen. Stories have the power to overcome our perceptions. They help us understand. Ask, listen, tell. It's our way of building our nation. Heartlines has developed resources to help you on this journey. These resources will empower you to build understanding, trust, and reconciliation through personal storytelling. Imagine if we were part of a powerful wave of change, one story at a time. We all have a story to tell. What's your story?
We all have a story to tell. What's your story? If you in different communities across, we are in this moment, in such a time as this, in conversation with Brian Helsby. And let me bring, he's already in studio. We've been moving this thread along on our broadcast for about 20 minutes already. And there he is, the Brian. Brian, we all have a
Yes.
story to tell. Carla Knotts has a story. And let's just see what Carla is saying. Lots of discussion on other platforms regarding saviorism and welfare and charity not being anti-racism work. Although, is that not a good starting point for growing real compassion and change? Carla, thank you for your comment. Brian, Carla bringing to us this reflection on this idea of saviorism and welfare, and the fact that it's not work that is designed to bring down systems of racism, systems of prejudice, systems of bias. What say you about these realities to what you've been doing through the story work around the country?
Yes, I mean, just to answer what Carl is saying, I think there's a lot of people who want to do good, but they haven't gone through a personal journey that helps them to really understand the issues or even to make the personal changes. And so they want to save the world, but sometimes in trying to save the world, we do more damage than we actually help. Whereas I think that story sharing can be, some people think, yeah, but that doesn't go deep enough. But it's a good starting point, because without building relational bridges, how are we going to get to know other people? How are we going to get to know people of other cultures and other language groups? And so story sharing can be a magic way. For example, there's one guy, Eric, that I meet every day when the office was still open. And he works in our office and he's on security. And so I really got to know Eric as I stopped every morning. And he told me that he's from Kwakwa, and he told me about his family and how many kids and what school his kids go to. And his story has unfolded day after day as I've taken an interest. And when Eric sees me coming in through the doors at downstairs at security, his face lights up. Why? Because we've got a relationship based on the fact that his story has been unfolded. I know his story, or I know part of it. And I know some of his dreams and his ambitions and things like that. And that's just one example. And Seth, you talked about 18,000 people who've been, our staff and our trainers have been in touch with and face-to-face with story sharing experiences. And those 18,000 have then gone out to facilitate other story sharing in their churches and Bible study groups and workplaces, etc. And so it's cascaded down to hundreds of thousands of people who have engaged with each other's stories. And when that happens, understanding gets created, trust gets created, empathy, healing. Because sometimes we know from therapy that stories, narrative therapy, that stories are part of a person's healing process. And we have so many divisions, so much hurt in South Africa, a past that has damaged so many people. And as we unfold the stories, as people share their stories, healing takes place. And it's a powerful tool that we have.
Thank you, Brian. Kala, not sir, I hope that that's in some way a reflection. And if I may capture a little bit again of what I've heard Brian saying, again, a quotable quote by Brian Helsby, not Brina Helsby. I'll edit that in a moment. But there's a lot of people who want to save the world. But in trying to save the world, we do more damage. Story sharing is a good starting point. It's a magic way. Brian, as we step for a moment into your story, there's a lot you can tell us. I'd like for you to share with us a little bit about your beginning and how you've come about to be who you've become, and the story piece that is significant for you in this moment. However, inspired by Kala, I think, and I've heard you in different spaces. What became your saving moment, and who were the people who helped save you from that saviorism mentality? I ask you this in light of being in a South Africa that is made complex by race. You yourself, from the aesthetics, you are quite handsome, but people could say, he's a white male. What does he know about justice? And I know that in your journey, there have been people that have anchored with you. So who's helped you in your story to save you from the savior mentality? Brian, it's now your moment to share with us a little bit of your story.
Yeah. So I think that the key is that I've had a number of mentors in my life, youth leaders when I was at school, people when I joined Youth for Christ at the age of 22. I must confess I was ignorant. I was far from having a social justice conscience. And that's been an unveiling, a growth through people speaking into my life. When I moved to Port Elizabeth in 1976, things sped up. There were people there in New Brighton, the township, who came around me and spoke, who taught me. I had so much to learn. I had to change so much of my own value system. There are so many beliefs that need to be adapted, and so getting involved in the work in the northern suburbs, in Galvindale, in the townships like New Brighton, Zwedi, KwaZulu, having church bishops in the church who were part of the struggle committee. I got involved in that. I was secretary of the struggle committee in Port Elizabeth, but I was learning more than I was able to give at that time. And Youth for Christ became very multicultural. We ended up with 15 Youth for Christ clubs that met over the weekend, and 5 of them were in the townships, 5 were in the suburbs, and 5 in the northern suburbs, colored areas, if I can use that term. And we started meeting together, all 500 young people. We started playing together. We started doing things together. We started learning from each other. And we built meaningful relationships that continue to this day. And in those 10 years that I was in Port Elizabeth, we created, from 76 to 86, we created a new South Africa way before our time. We were in constant trouble with the security police. My phone was tapped for 10 years. But we just became united. But even having said that, when I look back, I realized there's so much more that I could have done in terms of the struggle, in terms of teaching the young people that that we're now kind of building relationships together. And so I don't want to paint this rosy picture that we did everything right. We were on a learning curve, and we started on a very low base, and God's Spirit had to be teaching us during a time. But way before it became culturally acceptable to be a non-racial society, those 10 years in Port Elizabeth with those 500 young people, we did create something quite magical. I mean, let me give you an example. This may sound strange, but so every month we would, all 500 of us, get together, and we'd get other church youth groups to come together. And in Port Elizabeth, there was this huge hall that held 1,500 people, called the Feather Market Hall downtown. So this was about 1981. We held a what we call a hootenanny barn dance, kind of American line dancing. You probably never heard of it.
I've done it. I've done it in the Midwest when we were out in Iowa, square dancing, dancing. Yeah.
And so we thought it's just something totally different. We got 1,000 young people into that hall from the townships, from the colored area, and from the suburbs. And for 3 hours, we did barn dancing. Now, if you see in the videos or whatever, it's all totally integrated dancing and cowboy type dancing. And it was fun. And then on Monday of that day, I got a phone call from the guys in the township and said, "Hey, we loved Saturday night. It was brilliant. Can you give us the tapes? Because we want to start doing barn dancing in the townships." Now, this is hilarious when you think of all the cultural fences they got to jump. So they started a barn dancing club in New Brighton, Sweden, and Kwazakeli at that time. I mean, it was crazy, but it was magical. And, wow. Yeah, it was. But for us, it was a way of breaking down those barriers that was in the height of apartheid. If the security police were looking in there, they would have raided that body and they would have sent us all home. But those are the match. And I could tell you story after story of things that we did, the camps that we had, the going dune surfing, river rafting, just together in a new South Africa way before its time.
Wow, Brian, what beautiful memories. And those of you that have just come online, I see a few more viewers. Thank you for joining us. I'm in studio today on In Such a Time as This with Brian Helsby. Yes, Kala Nutsa, thank you. You are the slide on Vulindlela. That's what she says. Can you imagine people doing the slide on Vulindlela, barn dancing to Vulindlela? And Brian, as I'm listening to you, it takes out of the box crazy thinking to bring about efforts that reshape our society. I love the way that you said, in the time of the 10 years that you were there doing your work, you learned more than you even served. But people that you worked with, like Bishop in the church, Secretary of the Struggle Committee, these were positions that allowed you to serve. So friends, as you're listening to that story, I hope that in some way, Carla and others, you've seen the reality of the power of story sharing to arrest our divisions, to provide us a moment where we can leave the positioning of I and other, and in the language of Dr. Chung Yung Kyung, we learned this language of coming to a common ground. Brian, one of the common grounds that I came to was an interfaith camp many years ago with a gentleman who's now passed on, but another amazing youth worker. He became an organizational consultant and specialist. Do you know who I'm speaking about?
Koki Seshabela.
There we go. I mean, look at it. You just have to say that. Interfaith camps, Koki Seshabela, Halala, Koki, Halala. Those of you that are from the South African youth clubs, SAYC, I think it is. South African Association of Youth Clubs. And if you're out there, just respect to Koki Seshabela. But Brian, when you talk about PE, this was another movement of youth work that was provided for people to be provided interface opportunities in the time of apartheid. We were, I guess we were closer to what that the democracy would be birthed. We knew it was coming. But even before it came, these interface camps were happening, camps that brought people together. At Kayara, I mean, when you talk about PE, I remember when we were between the ages of 13 and 16 and 17, going to camps, multicultural, multiracial, multilingual, expressing and understanding faith and God and life in the multicultural sense of being. So, what beautiful moments were realized in
Yes.
those places.
And in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we were quite specific as to we wanting to bring people together. And apartheid was as effective, tragically, as ever. And people did not know each other. And so those camps were designed to bring people together. So we would again take 30 young people, equally divided between the different cultural groups, and we would go to Magaliesburg for a weekend from Friday afternoon through to Sunday afternoon. And we would have a whole lot of exercises and games and that would stir the emotions, create tears, but create understanding and bring people together in understanding. And they were powerful camps, and God used them in amazing ways. And we ran a number of them over those years at that time.
Well, while we talk about the past, those of you that know Kayara and Youth for Christ, they're still doing amazing work out there. I was honored to be a speaker at Youth Week just a few years ago. I know they did Youth Week before COVID-19. I don't know what's going to happen in this year, but YFC, organizations like YFC and even SU that have been mentioned in Brian's biography are doing some beautiful work across South Africa. Brian, it's this moment when we turn to a reflection. And in this month of July, friends, our reflections are going to be focused on, through conversational story sharing, on this topic of beloved community in such a time as this. So here's a quote I'd like to bring to you all. Let's just take a moment to reflect on that quote together. It's a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. Dr. King spoke about in around the 1950s, in the late 1950s, about this Josiah Roycean understanding of the beloved community. Now, I don't believe Josiah Royce was the only person in the world at the time that was thinking upon community. There's many expressions about it throughout the world. But in King's tradition of writing, this is where we see beloved community emerging. And in the context of a community that is built to live like Brian has just been talking to us about, almost in this magical moment, and I say magical not in any disregard, but in a moment that is beyond what the current place and time tells us can be realized. A moment when people of different race, gender, class, and language are able to be in relationships of mutual respect, understanding, and commitment. Now, I'm paraphrasing a lot of what the King Center in Atlanta documents and many other documents as well. But as we look at it, here's a reflection. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our hearts. I'm in studio with Brian Helsby, and as we go to this space and time of conversation, we want to do so with a critical reflection, some disruptive learning, and then as we come to close, Brian has already pointed us towards some actions. But in light of beloved community, in such a time as this, what actions can we? And so as we do this together, we'll share with you, Brian. My critical reflection in the last weekend and a bit as I go into this month of July with other guests as well, will be through this quote that I've just mentioned. And as we reflect on it together today, what is a critical reflection for you as you think beloved community?
Yes, and I think it has to be a goal of all of people who want to see change in South Africa. And so many years have passed since '94, And we have to ask ourselves, how much progress have we really made? How much energy have we spent in getting to know people of different cultural groups, different language groups within our communities, within our church? And more and more the suburban churches are becoming more multicultural. But who do we have coffee with after the church? Who do we go and visit in each other's homes? I stay in a townhouse complex, and when we moved here, we were quite intentional about going into a community that is diverse. But the fact that we in a townhouse complex with 20 units and a very diverse community doesn't mean that we know each other, doesn't mean that we are spending time with each other, doesn't mean that we're treating each other civilly and showing love. And so, as Martin Luther King said, there's got to be a change in our heart and our attitude. We've got to be intentional, because we automatically revert back to our comfort zone. And our comfort zones are where we don't have to make an extra effort to understand people, to understand their culture, to read what they're really saying. And so we've got to be intentional about who our friends are, who we spend time with. And if we are going to be healers in our nation, we can't just live a normal life. Every day we've got to be intentional about how we live, who we engage with, how we engage with them, how we treat people with dignity, how we listen more than we talk, how we believe that more people have got more to teach us than we have got to teach them. There's just so many different ways in which we can be salt and light in our society. We can be instruments of change, but we've got to be intentional about that.
Brian, thank you for those words. I'd like you to reflect with me in a way that might disrupt us a little bit. And for many folk, when they think upon beloved community, they hear the word reconciliation. And I'm also paying attention that I don't say reconciliation any longer without talking about justice as well. Well, we've never done it, but for some people, they say reconciliation can come along as a very, harmonious way to want to just, pacify people. There's no strength in this approach, and what becomes a difficult space to anchor our work in as we do our work of story relating and connecting is people say, well, stories just seem to, they kind of just seem to just meet us for the moment. Brian, I know that you've taken some time where your work and your leadership has led you into transformation efforts that have led to maybe not total economic transformation, but even in one's own person with your own resources. How have you seen beloved community becoming a reality when economic hardships have been overturned, lives have been transformed, not just politically, but economically so? And I know that in some of the organizations you've worked, you've kind of stumbled across things in your learning, sometimes through trial and error. But what has disrupted you in that space around economic transformation through the work you've done over the years?
Yeah, so I think that we both have to. It's our personal lives that we live, and it's what we do in our world, our places of influence, whether it's Youth for Christ or Heartlines or my church. What influence can I play that's going to bring a greater sense of social justice? But it's got to start with me as a person. And I don't want to say too much, but if social justice and inequality doesn't disturb you, then you're not thinking right and you're not living right. And a good example, before the lockdown, my wife and I, we went to the movies on a Friday night, and we went for a meal, and it wasn't an expensive restaurant. We've never been to an expensive restaurant. We've been taken a few times, but we were coming out, and Megan, my wife, said to me, the money that we've just spent on our fish and chips, could be so better used by the people that I'm working with in Alex. And the fact that we had spent, I think, 150 rand on a meal between the two of us disturbed her. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong to spoil yourself, to spend that money from time to time, but if spending that kind of money on yourself doesn't make you think of other people and what you can do for other people and how you can, and we need to be extra generous, and we need to be thinking, especially during this time of COVID-19, of just such a large percentage of people in South Africa who are struggling, who don't even have food on the table, who are now unemployed or underemployed. And we have to be asking the question vigorously, what can I do? And how can I adjust my living? And what can I not spend money on that can help people who are in dire straits at this time? And then there are the systemic issues in our world that need to be addressed, systemic issues in our churches, of how our churches are run, and especially in white-led churches, suburban churches, and the changes that they need to make, and what kind of catalyst can I be in my church to bring that kind of systemic change. And in society, we talk about Black Lives Matter in America and so on, but the reality is that our police, no matter what their cultural makeup, treat people in poorer communities in a way that they would never treat people in the suburbs. And that's wrong. That's injustice. That's Black Lives Matter all over in our own country. And so what do we do about it? Do we keep quiet? How do we speak? What do we say? How can we be an influence for good, for change? The history of apartheid has still affected us so dramatically and continues to affect us, affect our thinking and how we perceive people. And we've got a long, long journey still to make. And we've also got to help white people who are still in their lagers, still in their kind of boxed-in mentality, and help them to change. And so often the change they want to make or think that they need to make is quite superficial. And we need to encourage those kind of people to read the right books, to watch the right kind of movies, to engage in the right kind of discussions. And so often they're just not exposed in a way that's going to cause them to change.
Wow. So, friends, I want to bring in the voice of Tumisa Ketelo Matiwane. Brian, a few years ago, in the tradition of doing youth work, from where I learned it as myself, a former team member of Youth for Christ and a former Itemba member, and then having worked with people in that youth space. But in 2017, we had Tumisa Ketelo Matiwane as a fellow of the Desmond Tutu Youth Fellows of the South Africa connection, and then they traveled to the States. And this is what she just has taken out of all that we said. I like these millennial, beautiful young people that just rapture it like this. She said, recognizing and being mindful of your privilege. So thank you, Tumisa, for that. If you're listening to the story sharing of Brian Helsby, he just allotted and plotted how one needs to build their lives personally. Brian so beautifully said, what car am I driving? Where am I eating? Where am I spending my money? Also can add to that, if you like, personal toward communal effort. But then we begin to pay attention to the systemic changes as well, because racism, injustice, building a beloved community can't only be done just one person on their own. Yes, one person can make a difference, but we need some systemic impact. And Kumisa adds to that, as she says, recognizing and being mindful of your privilege is a beginning point. Brian, you mentioned about books, and here's something that I know why. We may have had differences, and I mean, you're definitely more handsome than I. You definitely were a better footballer, I think. there's many differences, but here's one thing where we found a common ground, and it's through a book by Ron Sider, which I know way back when affected your thinking. And this is what the book is entitled: Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger. I mean, for some people, they would say this is a classic. I remember when we were studying and doing our theology studies around theology of poverty and thinking economically so, that book came up. Now, you read it many years ago, and I know it made a significant difference. Brian, as a leader, the Ron Sider kind of thinking, how have you applied it in the organizations where you did have the power as a leader, as a national director, as a board chairperson, to shift the pulse of not just personal change, but what could an organization do? What could a people do? What could a community do to bring change? So, how did Ron Sider help you and your leadership?
Yes, I heard Ron Sider speak at a conference in Pretoria in 1979. His bit of history, and then I read his book "Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger." But his talk at that conference changed my life. I'd already moved to Port Elizabeth in '76, so I was dabbling in multicultural ministry with Youth for Christ at that time. But I went from that talk and I went outside and I literally wept for about 3 hours as God spoke deep in my heart. And I realized that although I had made superficial change in the way that I was living, that still deep in my heart, there was a lot that needed to change. And I committed myself then to be part of the solution in South Africa and not part of the problem. And I failed that commitment many times, but it was a deep commitment. And the title of that book, Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, and there are many ways in which, as a Youth for Christ staff, you're not rich materially, but in so many ways, just being white made you rich, and in education and many other things, and wanted to use what God had given me, the wealth that God had given me, to help other people who were less privileged. And so, yes, just being white, you have enormous privilege that comes with that, and opportunities and connections, etc. And so that talk and that book changed my thinking, deepened my commitment to making a difference in South Africa, deepened my commitment to social justice, deepened my commitment to helping to move South Africa to a greater sense of equality and so on. So it affected my thinking in so many different ways and continues to do that. And I've just rebought that book on Kindle a couple of months ago to reread, and I started rereading that book again. Yeah.
Friends, I want to say to you all that as we think upon the work that Brian Helsby has done, in some way, I want to just say big ups to you, Brian, and honor in light of even the efforts that were done within Youth for Christ, an organization that way back when I used to work with and still am associated to in many ways. And so grateful for the work that Youth for Christ as an NGO, a faith-based organization, has done in light of efforts to shift people's thinking, not just personally, but systemically so. When one would attend a conference like the National Youth Leaders Conference that Johannesburg Youth for Christ and Sean Moodley and his team used to champion, YFC as an organization created an impulse for people to think, not just one person at a time, but in that effort, as one person began to think as a leader, they took it back to their communities. I remember the teams. Trevor Sampson, a beautiful musician who does amazing work, calls himself a musicianary, but Harvest teams and YFC teams that created content, a context for people to express and experience beloved community. Brian, the way you spoke to us today about PE and the 10 years in Port Elizabeth is about this beloved community. As we come to close and move towards our close, I'd like you to reflect with us on what you sense in this moment is a call that you feel personally, but also as we move move it from one person to the next to create a community effort. What are some of the ideas and thoughts that are, mulling around in your mind of our call to action and service in such a time as this?
Yeah, I think that to to create a community, there's got to be a commitment. And you've got to be intentional about the way that you live your life and about the way that you interact with people. And creating a beloved community starts with one person at a time. And, and it spreads, and it's got to spread from you. People have to see in you love, compassion, empathy, caring for people, and people then catch this and want to pass it on. And so I don't think you create a community, a beloved community, by getting 30 people in the room and say, okay, now let's work on being a community. You create that community one person at a time, and another person joins, and another person is brought in. And there's always a danger saying, well, we've got enough people. We don't want to bring more people in because they're going to be disruptive, or they're going to be too much trouble. And so often when we create a beloved community, it's easy to leave out the people that are difficult, the people that are difficult to listen to, difficult to spend time with. And very often they're broken, they're hurting, and they're needing our love and our attention and our compassion and empathy the most. And when we continue to give love unconditionally over and over again, expecting nothing back, there comes a time when our love breaks through into their lives. And they then are in a position to contribute back into that beloved community. But so often we only want to engage with people who can give back to the community. The people who need the community the most are the people who are the most difficult to love. And God's called us to love those people.
Wow. So if you're out there and you are in a church or in a corporate place or a non-government organization, please pay attention. Who are the people that are difficult to have around me? Who are those that when they walk in the room, you have an immediate allergic reaction to them just arriving? And if that happens to you, I mean, it's a call out today. It's a tough one. I'm saying it in jest, but can you imagine that as that person walks into the room, you already know your body has an allergic reaction just because they arrived in the room. They could be right with you now in your workplace. They could be right with you now in your faith community. Because as Brian just mentioned, be wary and careful that we don't create communities where we say, well, it's just about us and not about them. But how does our community become inclusive, where we say, even that person that is about to give me a so-called emotional allergic reaction, I'm wanting to sit around the table with them. I'm wanting to have a meal with them. I'm wanting to engage them instead of dislocate from them. So,
Cynthia, if I can add to that, as I reflect back on the 35 years of running a youth group on a weekly basis, I spent a disproportionate amount of my time with two groups of people, with leaders and with the broken. And because I think that's where we need to invest a lot of our time. Just a thought.
Wow. So there we have it. How can you take your story sharing, turn it into power for you to bring people together? Brian Helsby is available. Is accessible online. I'm going to ask Brian to also forward me his email and contact details, which I have, and we'll put that out. Serving as the senior program manager at Heartlines. I hope that you've enjoyed this time. Brian, it's your time to give us some closing words as we get ready to close out the show. So I'm honored today to be co-hosting this conversational session with you. Brian Helsby, otherwise known as not Mr., not Bishop, not Reverend, not Sir, just known as Brian. Because like Brian said, all you need to be known with a name like Brian is to be called Brian. So, Brian, over to you to close
Yeah,
out the show.
yeah. I think we all have to choose how we want to live our lives. But I want to encourage you every day to go into your world and find ways of giving out love and compassion to the people around you. I know under lockdown it's more difficult, under social distancing more difficult, but we can do it and we have to do it. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Brian, thank you for being with us in studio today. We appreciate your time. Greetings to Megan and the family. May you continue with strength and courage to do the work of building beloved community. Friends, that's Brian Helsby. I will say to you, Brian, peace out. Keep it real. Can I get a peace sign, Brian?
Yeah,
You
what's
gave
a
me a
peace
high
sign?
five. Yeah, there we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, Brian, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today. Brian, that's Brian Helsby at the top of this hour. It's been amazing to have him in studio. I hope you enjoyed him as well. Please capture some of the learning. There was so much that was put out there. And I just want to say to you all again as we close out this afternoon, return, and if you are available, come back and be with us. We have Colin Shava, Executive Secretary for Youth from the All Africa Conference of Churches, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya at 4 p.m. And then we have Vanita Pillay. You're not going to want to miss this, especially those of you that are in professional communities. If you're a trainer and consultant, Vanita has had a career that has led her through different spaces with a core focus on people and culture. She'll be reflecting with us around beloved community as well. So in this hour, we've had Brian Helsby, on to Colin Shava, and then Vanita Pillay. Friends, as I close out the show, for some of your own knowledge and knowing, please be aware of the South African Council of Churches. Please, I know that some of us are not in church and we are in different religious spaces, but please allow this online website, www.churchinaction.org.za, to be of service to all communities across South Africa. Why am I saying that? Um, dub, uh, um, Sorry, let me say again. The SACC online website, together with Heartlines, have partnered and many other organizations to provide us information around issues of the coronavirus, awareness matters around issues of people's safety in 11 official languages. So there you have it. A WhatsApp number, if you're in South Africa, 060-058-2107. And these resources can be made available to you for free. All you got to do is download it, put up the posters in 11 official languages right across the country. As we close out the show today on Beloved Community, I'd like to bring you a favorite resource as a video that I have, and it's by Dr. Maya Angelou. So thank you for being with me and Brian today. It's been an honor to be of service to you all. See you right back here online at 4 p.m. with Colin Shava. But let's close out as we think upon Beloved Community through the voice and the poetic telling of Maya Angelou. Thank you very much, and thank you for the honor and the privilege of your time. Bye now.
If I think of my life as a class and what I've really learned, I've learned a few things. First, I'm aware that I'm a child of God. It's such an amazing understanding to think that the it, which made fleas and mountains and rivers and stars, made me. What I prayed for is humility, to know that there's something greater than I. Then I have to know that the brute, the bigot, and the batterer are all children of God, whether they know it or not. And I'm supposed to treat them accordingly. And it's hard, and I blow it all the time.
Mongrel class of people.
I'd like everybody to think of a statement by Terence. The statement is, I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. If you can internalize the least portion of that, you will never be able to say of an act, a criminal act, or I couldn't do that. No matter how heinous the crime, if a human being did it, you have to say, I have in me all the components that are in her or in him. I intend to use my energies constructively as opposed to destructively. If you can do that about the negative, just think what you can do about the positive. If a human being dreams a great dream, dares to love somebody, if a human being dares to be Martin King or Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Malcolm X, if a human being dares to be bigger than the condition into which she or he was born, it means so can you. And so you can try to stretch yourself. So you can internalize, homo sum, humani nihila me alienum puto. I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. That's one thing I'm learning.
Friends, thank you all for joining the show. At the top of this hour, we are saying goodbye to you. I see Brian is still around. I'll just say to him to also greet some of you that have hung around. So, Brian, you can please say goodbye. Here we have Brian Helsby, and he's saying his goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thanks, Brian. Thank you for being with us. So that was our first segment for today. Conversational story sharing. Like I said, as we close the show, hopefully you've been challenged by the thoughts, the thought leadership. There's been some learning for you, and what a beautiful way to close out with the words of Maya Angelou. I am a human being. As you build communities, as you think upon beloved community, how do you ensure that people are humanized and not dehumanized in such a time as this? Join us again at 4 p.m. with Colin Shava, and then 8 p.m. South African Standard Time with Vanita Pillay. Thank you very much, everybody. See you back here at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Bye now.